Welcome to True Horror Stories Film. My name is Jonathan. I had been grateful if you'd settle in and watch this video before you get too cozy. I would love to hear from you. Let me know. How do you feel about this? What are your thoughts? I am posting this because I need people to understand what can happen when you respond to the wrong ad online. My name is Brendan, and I am the only person who survived what happened at Martha Gresham's farmhouse on Thanksgiving 2023. The detective handling the case, Rosa Santos, told me that sharing my story might help catch Martha before she does this again. So here it is. I was 24 years old that November. Fresh out of college with a degree I could not use and student loans I could not pay. My parents had moved to Arizona the year before. My girlfriend had left me in October, and I was working night shifts at a warehouse just to keep my studio apartment. I had no family nearby, no close friends in the area, and the idea of spending Thanksgiving alone in my apartment, eating ramen, felt unbearable. That is when I saw the Craigslist ad. The post was simple, almost old-fashioned in its wording. Thanksgiving dinner for those alone, it read. Home-cooked meal in a traditional New England farmhouse. No one should spend the holiday by themselves. 3 guests welcome. Must RSVP by November 20th. There was a phone number. I stared at it for a long time before I called. An elderly woman answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm, grandmotherly. She introduced herself as Martha Gresham, 73 years old, a widow who had been hosting Thanksgiving for strangers for the past 12 years. She explained that her children lived overseas, that her house was too big and too quiet, that cooking for one person felt wrong on Thanksgiving. I just want to share a meal with people who might otherwise be alone, she said. No strings attached. Just good food and good company. I asked about the other guests. She said she had already confirmed 2 others, a divorced businessman named Lawrence and a man named Dalton who was traveling through the area. 3 guests total. She gave me the address, a rural route about 40 minutes outside of Manchester, New Hampshire. 3 miles from the nearest neighbor, she mentioned, apologizing for the remoteness. But that is what makes it peaceful, she added. No traffic, no noise, just us and the woods. I should have recognized the warning signs, the isolation, the careful selection of guests. But I was lonely, and she sounded so kind, and the idea of a real Thanksgiving dinner was too appealing to question. I arrived at the farmhouse at 2 in the afternoon on Thanksgiving Day. The house was exactly as she had described it, white paint grayed by New England winters, surrounded by dense woods on 3 sides. The driveway was long, winding through bare trees that scraped against the November sky. I did not see another house in any direction. Martha met me at the door. She was small, maybe 5 feet tall, with white hair pulled back in a bun and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She wore a floral apron over a cardigan and slacks. She looked like every grandmother in every Norman Rockwell painting I had ever seen. "Brendan," she said, smiling. Come in. You were right on time." The house smelled like turkey and stuffing. A fire crackled in the living room. Classical music played softly from a radio in the kitchen. Everything felt warm, safe, normal. Lawrence arrived 15 minutes later. He was in his early 50s, wearing a button-down shirt and khakis, carrying a bottle of wine. He worked in insurance, he said, recently divorced, no kids. His ex-wife had gotten the house in Boston. He was living in a short-term rental, starting over. He shook my hand firmly, made small talk about the weather, complimented Martha on her home. Dalton showed up last, just before 3. He was different from us. Younger than Lawrence, older than me. maybe mid-30s. He wore a faded military jacket, jeans with holes in the knees, and work boots that were caked with mud. His hair was long, tied back in a ponytail. He had a duffel bag slung over his shoulder that looked like it held everything he owned. "Sorry I am late," he said to Martha. His voice was rough, like he did not use it often. "Car trouble." Martha smiled at him the same way she had smiled at me and Lawrence. "No trouble at all, Dalton. Come in and get warm." The first 2 hours were normal. We sat in the living room drinking wine, eating cheese and crackers that Martha had set out. She asked us questions about our lives, about where we were from, what we did for work. She was a good listener, nodding along, asking follow-up questions that made you feel heard. Lawrence talked about his divorce, how his wife had accused him of emotional distance. Dalton said he had been traveling for work, construction jobs mostly, staying in motels or his car. I mentioned my recent breakup, my job at the warehouse, how I had not spoken to my parents in weeks because I felt ashamed of where I had ended up. Martha listened to all of it with sympathy in her eyes. "You are all so young," she said. "You have time to start over. That is what Thanksgiving is about, is it not? Gratitude for what we have and hope for what is coming." At 5 o'clock we sat down for dinner. The dining room table was set with china and cloth napkins. The turkey was golden brown, surrounded by bowls of mashed potatoes, green beans, cranberry sauce, stuffing. It was the kind of meal I had not seen since I was a kid. We ate. We talked. We laughed. For a while, I forgot how lonely I had been. That's when things started to change. It was small at first. Dalton excused himself to use the bathroom. He was gone for maybe 10 minutes. When he came back, Martha was watching him. Not obviously, just a quick glance, the kind you do not notice unless you are paying attention. But I noticed. A few minutes later, she turned on the television in the living room. The evening news. The anchor was talking about a string of burglaries in rural New Hampshire. Then the story changed. Police are searching for an escaped inmate who failed to return to a work release program earlier this week, the anchor said. The man, 36-year-old Dale Thornton, was last seen in the Manchester area. He is considered dangerous and should not be approached. The photograph on the screen showed a man with long dark hair and a military-style jacket. The resemblance to Dalton was not exact, but it was close. Close enough. Lawrence saw it too. I watched his face change. He looked at Dalton, then at Martha, then back at the TV. Dalton did not react. He kept eating, his head down, his fork scraping against the plate. Martha turned off the TV. "Terrible, is it not?" she said. "You cannot trust anyone these days." The atmosphere shifted. Lawrence became quiet. I felt my stomach tighten. Dalton did not say anything, but I could feel him withdrawing, his shoulders hunching, his eyes avoiding ours. After dinner, Martha suggested we move to the living room for dessert. "Pumpkin pie," she said with fresh whipped cream. Lawrence and I followed her. Dalton stayed in the dining room, staring out the window at the dark woods beyond. Martha brought out the pie. As she set it on the coffee table, Lawrence leaned close to me and whispered, "Did you see that news report?" I nodded. "That guy looks just like Dalton," Lawrence said, his voice low and urgent. "What if it is him?" "I do not know," I said. "Maybe it is just a coincidence." But I did not believe that. Neither did Lawrence. Martha returned to the kitchen. Lawrence stood up, pacing. "We need to be careful," he said. "If that is him, if he is dangerous, we need to do something." "Like what?" I asked. "I do not know." "Call the police? Lock ourselves in a room?" I looked toward the dining room. Dalton was still standing by the window, motionless, his back to us. There was something about the way he stood, something tense, coiled. Martha came back with coffee. She poured it for us, her hands steady. "Is everything all right?" she asked. "Fine," Lawrence said too quickly. "Everything is fine." But it was not fine. The rest of the evening felt like walking on glass. Lawrence kept watching Dalton. I kept watching both of them. Martha moved between us like a conductor, refilling drinks, offering more pie, keeping the conversation going with the same warm tone she had used all night. Around 9 o'clock, Dalton announced he was going outside for a cigarette. He grabbed his jacket from the coat rack by the door. As he put it on, something fell out of the pocket and clattered onto the floor. A knife. Not a pocket knife. A hunting knife, 6-inch blade, handle wrapped in black tape. The blade was stained with something dark. It could have been rust. It could have been something else. Dalton picked it up quickly, shoved it back in his pocket and walked outside without a word. Lawrence turned to me, his face pale. "Did you see that?" I nodded. "We need to leave," he said. "Right now." But before we could move, Martha appeared in the doorway. "Is there a problem?" she asked. "No," Lawrence said, but his voice shook. We were thinking we should probably head out. It is getting late." Martha smiled. "Oh, but I have not shown you the upstairs yet. I have guest rooms prepared. You are welcome to stay the night. It is a long drive back in the dark." "That is all right," I said. "I should really get going." "Me too," Lawrence said. Martha's smile did not waver, but something changed in her eyes. Something cold. "Well, if you are sure," she said. "Let me get your coats." She disappeared into the hallway. Lawrence grabbed my arm. "We are not staying," he whispered. "I do not care what she says. That guy has a knife. He matches the description from the news. We are leaving." "Agreed," I said. Martha returned with our coats. As she handed them to us, Dalton came back inside. His jacket was still on. His hands were in his pockets. He did not look at us. "Dalton is staying the night," Martha said. "He does not have anywhere else to go." Lawrence and I exchanged a look. We both knew what she was implying. If we left, we would be leaving Martha alone with him. With an escaped convict. With a man who carried a hunting knife. "Are you sure you will be all right?" I asked Martha. She nodded. "Oh, I will be fine. I have dealt with worse than this." There was something about the way she said it. Something that made the hair on my neck stand up. But Lawrence was already moving toward the door. "Thank you for dinner," he said. "It was lovely." "You are very welcome," Martha said. I followed Lawrence to the door. Dalton was still standing by the coat rack, silent, watching us. As I reached for the doorknob, Martha spoke again. "Drive safely," she said. "The roads out here can be dangerous at night." We left. Lawrence and I stood in the driveway, the cold November air biting at our faces. The woods around us were black, endless. There were no streetlights, no sounds except the wind in the trees. "I am calling the police," Lawrence said, pulling out his phone. "That guy is dangerous." "Do you have service?" I asked. He looked at his phone. No signal." "Me neither," I said, checking my own phone. Lawrence cursed. "We need to get to town. Find a payphone or something." "Should we warn Martha?" I asked. "She said she would be fine," Lawrence said. "And honestly, I do not want to go back in there." Neither did I. We got in our cars and drove. The driveway felt longer in the dark, the trees pressing in from both sides. My headlights cut through the blackness, and I kept checking my rearview mirror, half expecting to see Dalton running after me with that knife. I followed Lawrence's car for about 2 miles. Then his brake lights flared. He pulled over to the side of the road. I pulled up behind him and got out. "What is wrong?" I called. "I do not know," he said. He was standing by his trunk, staring down at something. I thought I hit something. I walked over. There was nothing on the road. No animal, no debris. "I felt a thump," Lawrence said. "Like I ran over something." "Maybe it was a pothole," I said. He nodded, but he did not look convinced. He opened his trunk as if checking for damage. That is when I saw it. A cell phone. Lying in the trunk, partially hidden under a blanket. "That is not mine," Lawrence said. I picked it up. It was an old flip phone, the kind you buy at gas stations with prepaid minutes. I opened it. There were no contacts saved, no call history. But there was a text message sent earlier that day. Confirmed. 3 guests. All vulnerable. Will proceed as planned. My blood went cold. I showed Lawrence the message. His face went white. "What the hell is this?" he said. "I do not know," I said. "But we need to get out of here. Right now." We ran back to our cars. I started the engine, my hands shaking. But before I could drive, I heard a sound behind me. Footsteps. Fast, heavy footsteps on gravel. I looked in the rearview mirror. Dalton was running toward us, his face twisted in panic. "Wait!" he shouted. "Please." Wait. Lawrence had already driven off. I hesitated, my foot on the gas. Dalton reached my window, pounding on the glass. "You have to help me," he said, his voice ragged. "She is going to kill me. She has been planning this the whole time." "What are you talking about?" I said. "Martha," he said. "She set this up. The ad, the dinner, all of it. She plants evidence, makes people think I am dangerous, then she gets them to kill me, or she kills them. She has done this before. I found bodies in the basement. Old bodies. She has been doing this for years. Why should I believe you?" I said. "Because you found the phone," he said. "That is hers. She dropped it in the trunk when she was getting your coats. That is how she communicates with whoever helps her. I do not know who, but she is not alone." My mind was racing. The knife. The news report. The phone. It all fit together, but not in the way I had thought. "Get in," I said. Dalton climbed into the passenger seat. I drove fast toward town. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. "Where is Lawrence?" Dalton asked. "He already left," I said. "He is ahead of us." But when we reached the main road, there was no sign of Lawrence's car. We drove for another 10 minutes, and then we saw it. His car was parked on the shoulder, engine still running, driver's door open. I pulled over. Dalton and I got out. The woods were silent. "Lawrence." I called. No answer. I walked toward his car, my heart pounding. The interior light was on. The keys were in the ignition. His phone was on the passenger seat. But Lawrence was gone. Dalton grabbed my arm. "We need to go," he said. "Now." We got back in my car and drove straight to the police station in Manchester. It took another 20 minutes. By the time we arrived, it was after midnight. The police listened to our story. They took the phone, took statements, sent officers to Martha's farmhouse. But when they got there, the house was empty. No Martha. No Lawrence. No evidence of anything we had described. The basement Dalton mentioned? Clean. The dining room table? Cleared. Even the dishes were washed. It was like the dinner had never happened. Lawrence's body was found 3 days later, in the woods about half a mile from Martha's house. He had been stabbed once in the chest. The knife was never recovered. Dalton disappeared before he could testify. The police searched for him, but it was like he had vanished. They found his duffel bag in a motel room in Vermont, but no sign of him. Detective Santos called me a week later. She told me they had been investigating Martha Gresham for years, that there were other cases, other disappearances linked to her farmhouse, but never enough evidence to charge her. She said Martha was methodical, careful, always one step ahead. She selects victims who will not be missed, Santos said. Isolated people, lonely people, people with no family, no close friends. She invites them in, manipulates them into believing one of the guests is dangerous, then orchestrates a situation where someone dies. Sometimes it is self-defense. Sometimes it is murder. Either way, she walks away clean. Why does she do it? I asked. Santos was quiet for a long time. I do not know, she said. Control, maybe. Or she just enjoys it. Some people do not need a reason. Martha Gresham has never been found. Her farmhouse was sold at auction 6 months later. The new owners tore it down and built a cabin on the property. I still think about that night. About the dinner, the knife, the phone. About Lawrence, who I barely knew but who died because he tried to do the right thing. About Dalton, who may have been a victim or may have been part of it. I will never know. Detective Santos told me that every November, around Thanksgiving, a new ad appears on Craigslist in cities across New England. Thanksgiving dinner for those alone, it reads. 3 guests welcome. Different phone number. Different address. But the same pattern. If you are alone this Thanksgiving, if you see an ad like that, do not respond. Do not call the number. Do not go to the house. Because Martha is still out there somewhere, posting her ad. And she is very patient. She is waiting for her next guests. If anyone has information about Martha Gresham or similar cases involving Thanksgiving dinner invitations from strangers, please contact your local police department or the FBI's Violent Criminal Apprehension Program. Do not attempt to investigate on your own. Do not respond to suspicious ads. Stay safe this holiday season. Jupiter's radiation belts are the most dangerous environment in the solar system short of the sun itself. Any spacecraft that ventures deep into them will be destroyed. Any crew that tries to survive there will die. The Italian brothers who recorded those lost cosmonauts in the 1960s, they heard what I heard. Voices screaming in the void. People dying alone in space. Governments denying everything. This is my testimony. This is my warning. If you work for a space agency, if they offer you a mission that sounds too good to be true, if they show you technology that seems impossible, if they promise you glory and discovery and a place in history, do not believe them. Check the metadata. Read the protocols. Look for the abandonment codes. And if you find them, walk away. Because Jupiter is waiting, and it is hungry. And they will feed you to it without hesitation if it means learning one more secret about how radiation kills. This happened between 2018 and 2019. I am sharing this because the people who sent us out there need to be held accountable. I worked as a mission specialist for a program that does not officially exist. What I am about to tell you will never be confirmed by any space agency. But the audio logs are real. The mission was real. And Commander Hayes died screaming. They called it the Jupiter Protocol, a classified deep space mission that was never supposed to reach the public. The official story if anyone ever asked, was that we were conducting routine orbital research around Earth's moon. But that was a lie. We were going to Jupiter, and they knew we would not all be coming back. I need you to understand something before I continue. Space agencies have been lying about mission failures since the beginning of the space race. In 1960, an R-16 rocket exploded on the launch pad in the Soviet Union, killing nearly 100 people. The Soviets covered it up for decades. In 1961, cosmonaut Valentin Bondarenko burned to death in a pure oxygen training chamber. They erased him from history until the 1980s. There are recordings, radio transmissions captured by Italian brothers in the 1960s, of cosmonauts dying in space on missions that were never acknowledged. Voices screaming in Russian as their capsules tumbled into the void. A woman crying, "I am hot, I am hot," as her spacecraft burned up on re-entry. The Soviet Union denied all of it. But the recordings exist. So when I tell you that our mission to Jupiter was classified, when I tell you that 3 crew members never made it home, you need to understand that this has happened before. Governments bury their failures. They erase the dead, and they move on. Our crew consisted of 5 people. Commander Michael Hayes, our pilot. Dr. Sarah Chen, our astrophysicist. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, our engineer. Dr. Elena Volkov, our medical officer. And me. I was the communications specialist. I was responsible for maintaining contact with mission control, for recording everything, for making sure that if something went wrong, there would be a record. I was supposed to document our success. Instead, I documented how they died. The journey to Jupiter takes approximately 18 months under normal propulsion. We were not using normal propulsion. They had developed something new, something they called the Alcubierre frame. It bent space-time around our spacecraft, allowing us to reach Jupiter in just under 4 months. The technology was experimental. They told us it was safe. They told us the radiation shielding would hold. They told us we would be fine. They lied about all of it. The first 3 months of the journey were unremarkable. We passed Mars without incident. The spacecraft, which they had named Prometheus, performed flawlessly. We maintained regular contact with mission control. Everything was proceeding according to plan. But as we approached the halfway point, as Jupiter began to grow from a distant point of light into something real, something massive, the transmissions from Earth started to change. They became shorter, more clinical. And then, 3 weeks before we reached Jupiter, mission control stopped asking about our well-being. They only asked about the data, about the measurements, about whether the radiation sensors were functioning properly. Commander Hayes noticed it first. He pulled me aside one evening, ship time, and asked me to review the transmission logs. I spent 6 hours going through every message we had received since launch. And that is when I found it. Buried in the metadata of a routine systems check from 2 months prior. A single line of code. A command string that should not have been there. It was an automatic protocol. If certain radiation thresholds were exceeded, if crew vital signs dropped below specific parameters, the Prometheus would continue the mission autonomously. It would collect the data. It would return to Earth. And it would leave us behind. They had programmed the ship to abandon us if things went wrong. Hayes confronted mission control. The response came back 6 hours later due to the signal delay. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, detached. They acknowledged the protocol. They said it was a safety measure. A failsafe. They said it was unlikely to be triggered. They said we should focus on the mission. Hayes smashed the console. I had never seen him lose control before. He was career military, a man who prided himself on discipline and composure. But in that moment, floating in the command module with Jupiter filling the viewport behind him, he understood what I understood. what all of us were beginning to understand. We were not explorers. We were test subjects. Dr. Volkov sedated him. We did not tell the others about the protocol. Not yet. We had 2 weeks before we reached Jupiter's orbit. 2 weeks to figure out how to survive. Jupiter's magnetosphere extends millions of kilometers into space. It is the largest structure in the solar system aside from the Sun itself. When we crossed the boundary, every alarm on the Prometheus began screaming. The radiation levels jumped by a factor of 10 within the first hour. The shielding held, but barely. We could hear it. A constant ticking sound as particles slammed into the hull. Like rain on a metal roof. Except this rain could kill us in minutes if the walls failed. The original mission plan called for us to study Jupiter's radiation belts from a safe distance of approximately 900,000 kilometers. But Mission Control had other plans. They ordered us to descend to 300,000 kilometers, into the heart of the radiation belt. Commander Hayes refused. He told them the ship could not handle that level of exposure, that the crew could not handle it. Mission Control's response was brief. Proceed with descent, or the Prometheus will execute Protocol 7 Omega, the automated abandonment protocol. We descended. Dr. Chen monitored the radiation levels as we fell toward Jupiter. She kept a running log, her voice steady, but strained. External radiation now at 400 rads per hour. Shielding holding at 92% efficiency. We should turn back. 500 rads per hour. Shielding at 87%. This is not survivable. 700 rads per hour. Shielding at 81%. We are all going to die here. At 300,000 kilometers, Mission Control ordered us to hold position and deploy the sensor array. It took Lieutenant Webb 4 hours to complete the deployment. 4 hours, in a radiation field intense enough to give him a lethal dose if the shielding failed for even 30 seconds. He made it back inside. He sealed the airlock. And then he collapsed. His dosimeter read 120 rads. Survivable, but only barely. Dr. Volkov put him in the medical bay and started him on chelation therapy to remove the radioactive particles from his bloodstream. But we all knew he was damaged. We all knew it was only going to get worse. The sensor array transmitted data for 72 hours. Jupiter's radiation belts are unlike anything near Earth. The particles are accelerated to nearly the speed of light by the planet's massive magnetic field. Electrons and protons slam into anything that enters their domain, tearing apart molecules, destroying electronics, killing living cells. NASA's Galileo probe endured radiation 3 times stronger than it was designed to handle before finally failing. And Galileo never descended as deep as we did. On the 3rd day at 300,000 kilometers, the first module failed. The communication array simply stopped working. I was monitoring the system when it happened. One moment, full functionality. The next, nothing. Just dead circuits and corrupted memory. I ran diagnostics. I rebooted the system. Nothing worked. I reported it to Hayes. He contacted Mission Control. Their response arrived 6 hours later. Continue collecting data. Manual communication protocols to be implemented. That meant someone would have to go outside and repair the array manually. Commander Hayes volunteered. I begged him not to go. The external radiation levels were over 1,000 rads per hour at that point. Even in a reinforced EVA suit, exposure time could not exceed 15 minutes without severe consequences. He smiled at me. That sad, tired smile I can still see in my dreams. He said, "Someone has to go, and it is not going to be any of you." He sealed his helmet at 0900 hours, ship time. The airlock cycled. He stepped outside into the void, tethered to the Prometheus by a single lifeline. I monitored his vitals. Heart rate elevated but steady. Respiration normal. Dosimeter climbing. 10 rads. 20. 30. He reached the communication array at the 12-minute mark. 58 rads accumulated. I listened to his breathing over the suit radio. Steady, controlled, professional. He began the repair. I watched the camera feed from his helmet. His gloved hands moved with practiced efficiency, removing damaged components, replacing them with spares from his tool pack. 60 rads. 70. 80. At the 14-minute mark, his dosimeter alarm went off. Warning. Accumulated radiation exposure approaching safety threshold. Return to airlock immediately. He ignored it. He finished the repair. He tested the system. Communication array restored. 98 rads. He turned to come back. And that is when I heard him scream. It was not pain. Not yet. It was surprise. Shock. I looked at the camera feed just in time to see Jupiter's day side swing into view above him. The sun rose over the planet's horizon, and Commander Hayes was caught in the Terminator zone, the boundary between night and day on the giant planet. The temperature shift was instantaneous. One moment, negative 150 degrees Celsius in shadow. The next, 430 degrees in direct sunlight. I watched the temperature readouts from his suit. Negative 150. Negative 80. 0. 100. 200. 300. His suit's cooling system was designed to handle gradual temperature changes. Not this. Not a 500-degree swing in less than 6 minutes. He screamed for 3 of those minutes. I heard every second. His suit temperature reached 121 degrees Celsius before his cooling system failed completely. That is the maximum temperature NASA EVA suits are rated for. After that, the inside of his suit became an oven. He stopped screaming at 410 degrees. The biomonitor went flat at 420. His body cooked inside the suit while I watched, while Jupiter's great red spot swirled in the background, while 100 billion tons of metallic hydrogen spun beneath him in the planet's core, generating the magnetic field that was slowly killing us all. The tether brought his body back automatically. We pulled him into the airlock. Dr. Volkov opened his helmet. The smell was unbearable. I vomited. Dr. Chen sobbed. Lieutenant Webb just stared, his face blank, his mind already shutting down from the horror and the radiation damage. We sealed Hayes in a body bag and stored him in the cargo bay. Then I sent a transmission to Mission Control. Commander Hayes is dead. We are aborting the mission and returning to Earth. The response came back 6 hours later. Negative. Continue data collection. Replacement command protocols uploaded to Prometheus AI. They were not letting us leave. Dr. Chen cracked first. On day 5 at 300,000 kilometers, she locked herself in the observation module and refused to come out. She kept repeating the same thing over and over. We are in the outer radiation belt. Europa orbit is at 940,000 kilometers. That is where human astronauts would receive a lethal dose in hours. We are at 300,000. We are already dead. We just have not stopped moving yet. She was right. Our cumulative radiation exposure had already exceeded safe limits. We were walking corpses, breathing and thinking and slowly falling apart at the cellular level. Lieutenant Webb died on day 7. His chelation therapy stopped working. The radiation damage was too severe. His organs began failing one by one. Kidneys first. Then liver. Then his bone marrow stopped producing blood cells. Dr. Volkov kept him sedated at the end. He died quietly, without pain, floating in the medical bay while Jupiter's storms raged outside the viewport. We put him in a body bag next to Commander Hayes. On day 9, Dr. Volkov told me she was experiencing symptoms: nausea, fatigue, hair loss, bleeding gums. The early stages of acute radiation syndrome. She estimated she had 2 weeks left, maybe 3. She asked me how I was feeling. I lied. I told her I was fine. But I was not fine. I could feel it happening. A weakness in my muscles. A fog in my mind. The taste of metal in my mouth. We were dying. Both of us. And Mission Control kept sending the same message. Continue data collection. Dr. Chen stopped eating on day 12. She stopped speaking on day 14. On day 16, I found her in the observation module. She had opened the internal airlock door manually. Then she had opened the external door. The module's atmosphere vented into space in less than 3 seconds. Explosive decompression. Her body was intact, frozen instantly by the void. Her eyes were open. She was looking at Jupiter. I sealed the module. I put her body with the others. Dr. Volkov and I were alone. We made a decision on day 18. We were going to override the AI and turn the Prometheus toward Earth. Mission Control could not stop us if we moved fast enough. The Alcubierre drive needed 12 hours to charge. We could be gone before they could react. We started the sequence. 8 hours into the charge, Dr. Volkov collapsed. Internal hemorrhaging. The radiation had destroyed the lining of her intestines. She was bleeding out internally. I carried her to the medical bay. She looked at me with those kind eyes and said, "You have to tell them what happened here. You have to make sure people know." Then she closed her eyes and died. I was alone. The Alcubierre drive finished charging on day 19. I initiated the return sequence. The Prometheus began to pull away from Jupiter. Mission Control sent 27 messages in the span of 6 hours, all of them ordering me to abort and return to the radiation belt. I ignored them. I deleted the AI's abandonment protocol from the core systems. And I ran. The journey back took 3 months. 3 months alone with 4 bodies in the cargo hold and the knowledge of what they had done to us. I monitored the radiation levels in my body. I watched my hair fall out in clumps. I watched my skin bruise and bleed. I watched myself dying in slow motion. Earth orbit was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. That blue sphere hanging in the black. Home. I transmitted my logs. All of them. Every recording. Every data point. Every moment of Commander Hayes cooking inside his suit. Every second of Dr. Webb bleeding out in the medical bay. Everything. Mission Control responded within minutes. They ordered me to erase the logs, to report that there had been a catastrophic systems failure, that all crew members died instantly. They promised me full medical care if I complied. They promised me a pension, a quiet retirement. They promised me silence. I refused. They brought the Prometheus down in a restricted military zone in Nevada. I was quarantined immediately. They told me I had been exposed to dangerous biological materials during the mission. They said it was for my safety. But I knew the truth. They were keeping me isolated, making sure I could not talk. The medical examinations took 3 weeks. The doctors would not tell me anything directly, but I overheard their conversations. Severe radiation damage, bone marrow failure, multiple organ damage. 6 months to live, maybe 8 if they started aggressive treatment. On the 4th week, 2 men in suits visited my isolation room. They were not doctors. They worked for an agency that does not officially exist. They told me the Jupiter Protocol mission had never happened. They told me Commander Hayes, Dr. Chen, Lieutenant Webb, and Dr. Volkov had never existed. They told me I had been suffering from a psychotic break during a routine lunar mission, and that everything I remembered was a delusion. They showed me falsified records, altered personnel files, deleted mission logs. They told me if I ever spoke about what happened, if I ever tried to tell anyone, I would spend the rest of my very short life in a psychiatric facility. And then they left. But I kept copies, hidden drives, encrypted files, audio recordings I smuggled out during a transfer between facilities. This is real. This happened, and they are still sending missions to Jupiter. NASA's Juno probe arrived at Jupiter in 2016. It was designed to study the radiation belts, to measure particle acceleration, to understand the magnetosphere. The official mission parameters keep it in a polar orbit, swooping down through gaps in the radiation belts, avoiding the most intense regions. But I've seen the classified addendums, the ones marked for internal review only. They are planning another manned mission, another crew of test subjects to send into that hell. I am dying. The radiation is destroying my body from the inside out. I have maybe 2 months left before the organ failure becomes terminal. But before I go, I need people to know what they did to us. I need people to understand that space agencies will sacrifice their crews if it means collecting data, if it means advancing knowledge, if it means winning a race that never ended. Commander Hayes died because they sent him outside in the Terminator zone. Lieutenant Webb died because they ordered us to deploy sensors in a radiation field that should have killed him instantly. Dr. Chen died because she could not live with what they had done to us. Dr. Volkov died because the mission lasted too long, because we stayed in that hell for 19 days, when we should have left after 19 hours. They all died because someone decided their lives were worth less than research data. To this day, I still hear Commander Hayes screaming over the radio. I still see Dr. Chen's frozen face looking at Jupiter through the viewport. I still smell the blood from Dr. Webb's internal hemorrhaging. I still remember Dr. Volkov's last words. You have to make sure people know. Now you know. The Jupiter protocol was real. The mission happened. And somewhere in a military warehouse in Nevada, there are 4 body bags with the remains of the bravest people I ever knew. They deserve better than this. We all did. The boy's name was Maddox Durkosh. He was 2 years old. He loved animals. His mother brought him to the zoo to see the doggies. I need to tell you about something that happened at the zoo where I worked. Something that changed how I see animals, how I see people, and how I see the thin line between safety and absolute horror. My name is Marcus Webb, and I was a senior zookeeper at Riverside Zoo for 11 years. I loved that job. I loved the animals, the routine, the quiet mornings before the crowds arrived. I thought I understood the nature of predators, the careful balance between wildness and containment. I was wrong. This happened on a cold November morning in 2012. I was assigned to the African painted dog exhibit that day, which meant monitoring the viewing platform, checking the barriers, making sure everything was secure before we opened to the public. The painted dogs were relatively new to our collection, a pack of 11 that we had acquired just 8 months prior. Beautiful animals, really. Mottled coats of black, tan, and white. Intelligent eyes. But there was something about them that always made me uneasy. They watched us. Not the way lions watch, with that lazy, disinterested gaze. Not like bears, who mostly ignore human presence. The painted dogs watched with focus, with intent. They studied patterns. They learned schedules. I had noticed, over the months, that they knew exactly when feeding time was. They knew which keepers brought food and which brought medicine. They knew the difference between a routine check and something unusual. I should have trusted that unease. The viewing platform was built 5 years before I started working there. 14 feet high, with a metal railing and mesh netting underneath, designed to catch dropped items like phones, cameras, sunglasses. The signs were everywhere, bright yellow with red lettering. Do not climb on the railing. Do not lift children over the barrier. Do not throw items into the enclosure. Standard zoo warnings that most people ignored in small ways, leaning too far, holding kids up for a better view. That morning I arrived early. The fog was thick, clinging to the ground like something alive. I walked the perimeter of the painted dog enclosure, checking the fence line, the gates, the locks. Everything seemed normal. The dogs were in their heated shelter, waiting for their morning meal. I could see their eyes in the darkness, reflecting the dim light, watching me. I climbed up to the viewing platform to inspect the railing and netting. That is when I noticed it. The netting sagged in the center. Not much, just a few inches, but enough that I knew something was wrong. I knelt down, running my hand along the mesh. Several of the attachment points had corroded, rusted through from months of rain and humidity. The netting was not designed to hold anything heavier than a phone or a water bottle. It certainly could not hold a child. I radioed maintenance immediately. Told them we needed the platform closed until the netting could be reinforced or replaced. They said they would send someone out to assess it, but the zoo was opening in 45 minutes. Could it wait until after closing? I should have said no. I should have closed that platform myself, put up barriers, refused to let anyone near it. But I was a zookeeper, not a manager. I did not have the authority to shut down an exhibit without supervisor approval. So I said I would monitor it closely, keep people back from the railing, watch for any problems. I went about my morning duties. Fed the dogs, cleaned the night house, checked water systems. By the time I returned to the viewing platform, the zoo had opened. Families were already gathering, pressing against the railing, pointing down at the dogs below. The pack had moved into the enclosure. They were more active than usual, pacing, circling the space beneath the platform. One of them, the alpha female, kept looking up. Not at the people, exactly. At the netting. I moved through the crowd, gently asking people to step back from the railing. Most complied. Some gave me annoyed looks, but moved anyway. Then I saw her. A young woman, maybe late 20s, with a toddler in her arms. The boy was maybe 2 years old, fussy, crying because he could not see over the railing. She was trying to calm him, pointing down at the dogs, but he was too small. He could not see anything but the metal bars. I watched as she looked around, saw that no one was paying attention, and lifted him up. Not onto the railing. Over it. She held him by his waist, his little legs dangling in the air above the enclosure. Just for a second, she told herself. Just so he can see the doggies. I started moving toward her. Not running, because I did not want to startle her, but walking quickly, my hand already reaching out. I was maybe 10 feet away when I saw the boy twist in her grip, excited by the animals below. She tried to adjust her hold, tried to pull him back. And she dropped him. Not intentionally. Not out of malice or neglect. Just a mother's grip slipping. Just physics and bad luck, and a single terrible instant where everything went wrong. He fell. 14 feet down, arms flailing, a small confused sound escaping his throat. He hit the netting, and for a fraction of a second, I thought it might hold. The mesh caught him, cradled him. Then it tore. The corroded attachment points gave way all at once, and the boy dropped through the netting like a stone through paper. He tumbled another 6 feet and hit the ground inside the enclosure. The impact was not hard enough to kill him. He landed on his side, crying, confused, alive. The dogs moved, instantly. I have worked with predators my entire adult life. I know how they hunt, how they assess prey, how they make decisions. The painted dogs did not hesitate. They did not investigate or approach cautiously. They saw prey, and they attacked. The mother started screaming. I grabbed my radio, called for emergency response, called for weapons, for backup, for anything. Other visitors were screaming now, pulling out phones, recording, backing away from the railing. A few tried to help, tried to climb down, but I held them back. Going down there would not save the boy. It would just give the dogs more victims. I could hear him crying. For maybe 15-20 seconds, I could hear him. Then the sounds changed, became something else. Something I still hear when I close my eyes at night. Zoo security arrived within 3 minutes. A police officer who had been patrolling the grounds reached us first. He looked down into the enclosure, saw what was happening, and drew his weapon. He fired twice, killing one of the dogs, trying to scatter the pack. It did not work. The other dogs kept going. They had tasted blood, triggered something primal and unstoppable. The officer kept firing, but the enclosure was large, the angles were wrong, and the dogs moved too fast. By the time we got the emergency gates open, by the time we got into the enclosure with poles and shields and tranquilizer guns, it was far too late. The boy's body, what was left of it, was retrieved 45 minutes after he fell. The autopsy later showed 46 separate wounds to his head and neck. His organs were destroyed. He bled out in less than 5 minutes, though it felt like hours to those of us watching. In the immediate aftermath, there was chaos. The mother was sedated, taken to the hospital. The police cordoned off the entire area. Witnesses were interviewed. The media descended like vultures, cameras and microphones and demands for answers. The zoo administration held an emergency meeting. They reviewed the security footage, examined the netting, read my maintenance report from that morning. They confirmed what I already knew. The netting was faulty. I had reported it. Nothing had been done. But they also confirmed what the mother had done. She had lifted her child over a clearly marked safety barrier. She had ignored multiple warning signs. She had created the situation that led to his death. The legal battles lasted for years. The family sued the zoo. The zoo countersued the family. Lawyers argued about negligence, about liability, about who bore the ultimate responsibility for a toddler's death. In the end, they settled privately. No criminal charges were filed. The viewing platform was removed. The painted dog exhibit was closed permanently. The dogs themselves were transferred to other facilities, except for the one killed during the rescue attempt. I heard later that they integrated well into their new packs, showed no unusual aggression, lived normal lives. As if nothing had happened. I quit 3 months after the incident. I could not walk past that empty space where the exhibit used to be. Could not stop thinking about the netting I had reported, the repair that never came, the 45 minutes I had watched families gather on a platform I knew was unsafe. I should have closed it myself. I should have refused to let anyone near it. I should have done more. But here is the thing that haunts me most, the thing I have never told anyone until now. That morning when I first inspected the netting, when I found the corroded attachment points and called it in, I noticed something else. Something I did not include in my report because it seemed impossible, because I convinced myself I was mistaken. The attachment points did not just corrode naturally. They were scratched, worn down, as if something had been worrying at them, methodically, repeatedly, over weeks or months. I looked down at the dogs that morning, watching me from their shelter, and the alpha female was staring directly at the netting, her head tilted, her eyes focused on the exact spot where the attachments were weakest. Painted dogs are intelligent. They solve problems. They plan hunts, coordinate attacks, learn from observation. They are patient. I told myself it was impossible, that I was seeing patterns where none existed, that animals do not sabotage human infrastructure, do not set traps, do not wait for opportunities. But I have watched the security footage from that morning, the footage the zoo administration chose not to release publicly. I have watched it dozens of times, analyzing every frame. And in the hours before the zoo opened, while the platform was empty and the fog was thick, you can see the dogs beneath the platform. You can see them jumping, testing, reaching toward the netting with their paws and teeth. You can see the alpha female hanging from the mesh for several seconds, her weight pulling at the weakened attachment points. You can see her drop down, look up at her work, and return to the shelter to wait. I do not know if they understood what they were doing. I do not know if they planned it, if they hoped for prey, if they somehow knew the netting would fail. Maybe I am seeing intention where there was only animal curiosity. Maybe the corrosion was natural, and their interest was coincidental. But I worked with those dogs for 8 months. I watched them learn, adapt, strategize. And I saw the look in the alpha female's eyes that morning, staring up at the weakened netting, waiting. Predators are patient. They watch. They learn. They wait for the moment when safety fails, when barriers break, when prey makes a single fatal mistake. I think about him every day. I think about the netting I reported. I think about the dogs watching from below, waiting for something to fall. And I think about all the other enclosures, all the other barriers, all the other places where we trust that metal and mesh, and human engineering will keep us safe from things that want to kill us. I think about how thin those barriers really are, how patient predators can be, and how quickly everything can fall apart. There are some mistakes you cannot undo, some deaths you cannot prevent, some images you cannot erase. Commercial diving teaches you that. It teaches you that the ocean does not care how experienced you are. The water does not care how careful you are. The pressure does not care how much you want to live. I used to be a commercial diver. Past tense. I have not touched my gear in 3 years, 2 months, and 14 days. Not since Carlo. People always ask what it is like down there, working underwater in the dark. They imagine adventure, exploration, maybe danger in an exciting way. They do not understand what it is really like. They do not understand the silence, the pressure, the absolute suffocating isolation of being 100 feet below the surface, where no one can hear you scream, even if you could. My name is David Chen, and I am 36 years old. I was a certified commercial diver for 11 years before I walked away from the profession entirely. I specialized in dam inspections, underwater maintenance, structural assessments. The pay was excellent. The work was steady. I was good at what I did, until the day I watched my dive partner die, and I could not do a single thing to stop it. This happened at the Riverside Dam in northern Georgia, October 27, 2020. It was supposed to be a routine inspection. We were checking the integrity of a control gate chain, standard procedure. Carlo Webb was my partner that day. 42 years old, married, 2 daughters. He had been diving commercially for almost 20 years. He knew the risks better than anyone. But knowing the risks does not mean you can always avoid them. The thing about working around dams and reservoirs is something called differential pressure. We call it delta P. It is the difference in water pressure between 2 points, and it creates suction. Powerful, invisible, absolutely lethal suction. If water is flowing from one area to another through a confined space, pipes, valves, gates, and something blocks that flow, the pressure differential can pin you against the opening, or pull you through it. Hundreds of pounds of force. Thousands, sometimes. Enough to trap your body so completely that you cannot move. cannot breathe, cannot escape. It does not matter how strong you are. It does not matter how experienced. Once Delta P has you, you are already dead. You just do not know it yet. That is why we have lockout to gout procedures. Before any diver enters the water near a dam or industrial site, every possible energy source has to be identified. Every valve, every turbine, every pump, everything. They are shut down one by one. The shutdowns are documented, verified, double-checked, triple-checked. The safety checklist is supposed to be foolproof. It was not foolproof that day. Carlo and I arrived at the site around 8 in the morning. The Riverside Dam is a massive structure on the Chattahoochee River. Water flows through enormous pipes called penstocks, which feed the turbines that generate electricity. Our job was to inspect a chain on one of the control gates. We would be working near a 10-inch valve that controlled water flow to one of the turbines. It should have been closed. It should have been locked. It should have been on the checklist. It was not. We went through our pre-dive routine the same way we always did. Gear check, communication check. Emergency protocols. Every felt normal. The surface team confirmed that the lockout to gout was complete. All systems shut down. All valves closed. We were clear to dive. I went in first. The water was cold, murky. Visibility maybe 10 feet at best. I descended slowly, following the guide rope down to the control gate structure. My breathing was steady. In, out, in, out. The sound of my own breath inside the helmet, the only sound in the world. That is what people do not understand about diving. It is silent down there. Absolutely silent. You cannot hear anything except your own breathing and the occasional crackle of the radio. Carlo descended behind me, his light cutting through the murk. We communicated through hand signals and short radio bursts. Everything nominal. Everything safe. I reached the chain we were supposed to inspect. It was coated in algae and silt, as expected. I began my examination, checking for stress fractures, corrosion, structural weakness. Carlo moved lower, toward the base of the gate. That is when it happened. I heard a sound I will never forget. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was just a sudden rush of water, like someone had turned on a massive faucet somewhere below me. I looked down and saw Carlo, maybe 15 feet away. His body had jerked suddenly to the left, toward the wall. He was not moving on his own. He was being pulled. I heard him on the radio. His voice was calm at first, professional. I have got suction here. Something is pulling me toward the intake. And then I saw it. His left arm had disappeared into a 10-inch opening in the wall. The valve, we were told, was closed. The valve that was supposed to be locked out. It was open. Water was rushing through it at a velocity I could not even comprehend. And Carlo's arm was inside. I kicked toward him immediately. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat, in my ears, in every part of my body. I reached him in seconds, grabbed his harness, tried to pull him back. It was like trying to pull a man off a wall made of concrete. He was not moving. The suction had him pinned. His chest was pressed flat against the wall. His helmet was tilted at an angle. I could see his face through the faceplate. His eyes were wide, terrified. He was trying to speak, but the pressure on his chest was so intense, he could not draw breath. Even with his diving gear, even with the regulator feeding him air, he could not get it into his lungs. The force of the water was crushing him. I grabbed his harness with both hands and pulled with everything I had. Nothing. He did not move even an inch. I radioed the surface team. My voice was shaking. Carlo is trapped. Repeat. Carlo is trapped. Delta P on the south wall valve. We need emergency shutdown. Now. The response was immediate, but useless. What valve? The checklist shows all valves closed. Confirm location. I screamed into the radio. I do not care what the checklist says. There is an open valve and it is killing him. Shut down everything. Shut down the entire system. Do it now. They tried. I know they tried. But it takes time to identify an unmarked valve. Time to trace the line. Time to locate the shutoff. Time Carlo did not have. I watched him die. It took 30 minutes for them to find the valve. Another 30 to fully close it and stop the water flow. For 60 minutes I held on to Carlo, trying to pull him free, knowing it was impossible. His movements slowed after the first 5 minutes. His hands, which had been clawing at the wall, went still. His eyes, which had been locked on mine, went distant. Empty. I was holding on to a corpse, and I could not let go. When they finally shut off the water, his body came free. I pulled him away from the wall and brought him to the surface, even though I knew he was gone. The medics worked on him for 40 minutes. CPR, defibrillator, everything. Nothing. He had been without oxygen for too long. His chest had been compressed for too long. He was dead before I even got him to the surface. The investigation revealed that the safety checklist was incomplete. The valve that killed Carl was not even listed. It was an old shutoff, installed decades earlier, that had been forgotten during a system upgrade. No one knew it was there. No one checked it. It was supposed to be sealed, but the seal had failed years ago, and no one noticed. Carlo died because of a paperwork error. I stopped diving after that. I could not do it anymore. Every time I even looked at my gear, I saw his face, his eyes, the way his hands clawed at the wall, the way his body went still. I still hear the sound of the water rushing. That sudden, terrible rush. I hear it when I am trying to sleep. I hear it when I am in the shower. I hear it when it rains. They diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress disorder 6 months later. I was having nightmares every night. Panic attacks whenever I was near water. I could not even take a bath without feeling like I was drowning. My wife suggested therapy. I went. It helped, a little. But nothing can erase what I saw. Nothing can erase the guilt. I should have checked that valve myself. I should have questioned the checklist. I should have done something, anything, to prevent what happened. But I did not. I trusted the system, and the system failed. Carlo's wife called me a year after the accident. She wanted to know what his last moments were like, what he said, whether he was in pain. I lied. I told her it was quick. I told her he did not suffer. I told her he probably did not even know what was happening. The truth is, he knew. He knew exactly what was happening, and he was terrified. She thanked me. She said it gave her some peace. I have not spoken to her since. I work in an office now. I push papers, attend meetings, do the kind of work that will never kill anyone. I am safe. I am stable. I am alive. But part of me is still down there, 100 feet below the surface, watching my friend die, feeling the cold water, hearing the silence, the terrible, suffocating silence that comes after someone stops breathing. People ask me sometimes if I miss diving, if I miss the adventure, the challenge, the thrill of working in an environment where most people would never dare to go. I tell them no. I do not miss it at all. What I do not tell them is that I still dream about it. I still dream about the darkness, the pressure, the silence. And I still see Carlo, his face pressed against the wall, his eyes locked on mine, silently begging me to save him. I could not save him. I think about that every single day. Delta P does not care about anything. If you block the hole will take you. And once it has you, no one is coming to save you. Not in time. Not ever. I learned that lesson on October 27th, 2020. Carlo learned it too. The difference is, I live to carry it with me. He did not get that chance. I keep his photo on my desk. His wife gave it to me at the funeral. He is smiling in the picture, standing on a dock somewhere, holding a fish he caught. He looks happy, alive, whole. I look at it every day and I think about how quickly everything can change. How one forgotten valve, one incomplete checklist, one moment of trust in a system that is not perfect can take everything away. I was 20 feet away from him when he died. 20 feet. And I could not do a single thing to help. That is the worst part. Not the nightmares. Not the guilt. Not the fear. It is the helplessness. The knowledge that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, no matter how much you want to save someone, you cannot. The water is stronger. The pressure is stronger. And the silence, when it comes, is absolute. I will never dive again. I will never go back into that darkness. I will never again descend into a world where I am so utterly, completely alone. Where death is always one breath away. Where silence is not peace, it is the sound of someone dying. Carlo died in silence, and I heard every second of it. That is what I carry now. That is what I live with. The memory of watching a good man, a husband, a father, a friend, die right in front of me while I held on to him and prayed for something, anything, to change. Nothing changed. Nothing ever does, down there in the dark. The water does not forgive, and neither do I. I need to tell someone what happened to me in Millfield, Pennsylvania. What I saw in that house. What I almost destroyed. The doctors say the damage to my cardiovascular system is permanent. They say I am lucky to be alive. But after what I discovered, I am not sure lucky is the right word. My name is Clara Whitmore, and I am 32 years old. Before all of this, I worked as a home health aide in Philadelphia. Good job, decent pay, normal life. Then the hospital where I was contracted cut their budget. 16 of us lost our positions in a single afternoon. I spent 4 months burning through my savings, sending out applications, hearing nothing back. You know how it goes. The rent does not care that you are trying. The electric company does not accept good intentions. By January of last year, I was desperate enough to take anything. That is when I found the posting on a caregiving job board. Private position, live-in preferred, excellent pay. The listing was sparse on details. Tend to specialized collection. Must be comfortable with non-traditional care environment. Must maintain strict confidentiality. No formal training required. $22 per hour plus room and board. I called the number that same day. A man answered on the first ring. His voice was thin, wavering. The voice of someone very old or very ill. "You are calling about the position," he said. Not a question. "Yes, sir. My name is Clara Whitmore. I have 5 years of home health experience, and I can you start Monday?" I hesitated. I would need to know more about the position first. What kind of care are we talking about? Maintenance care. Cleaning, monitoring, basic upkeep. The collection requires daily attention. Very delicate work. Are you comfortable around medical specimens? Medical specimens. I thought he meant something clinical. Teaching models, anatomical displays. I told him yes. Good. The house is at 417 Maple Ridge Road in Millfield. Be there Monday morning at 8. I will show you everything you need to know. That was it. No interview, no background check, no references requested. I should have known something was wrong right then. But $22 per hour, and the room and board meant I could give up my apartment, stop hemorrhaging money on rent I could not afford. Millfield is one of those towns that the highway forgot. 312 people according to the welcome sign. Half the storefronts on Main Street had plywood over the windows. The gas station had pumped so old they still had analog counters. It took me 40 minutes of driving in circles before I found Maple Ridge Road, a narrow strip of cracked asphalt that wound up into the hills past rusted mailboxes and overgrown driveways. 417 was set back from the road behind a line of dead pine trees. A Victorian house, paint peeling, shutters hanging crooked. The kind of place that makes you think about how many people have died inside it. I parked in the gravel driveway, grabbed my 2 duffel bags and walked up to the front door. Before I could knock, it opened. The man standing there was not what I expected. He was massive, well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and thick arms. But his face was wrong for his body. Gaunt, deeply lined, skin hanging loose, like he had recently lost a tremendous amount of weight. His eyes were rheumy and unfocused. His hands shook with a constant tremor. "Mr. Gessner?" I asked. "Call me William." His voice was stronger than it had been on the phone. He looked me up and down. "You are punctual." "Good. Come inside." The house smelled like chemicals. Not the clean, sharp scent of bleach or ammonia. Something sweeter, heavier. It coated the inside of my nose and settled in the back of my throat. The entry hall was dim, wallpaper yellowed and peeling. To the left, a staircase climbed into darkness. To the right, a hallway stretched toward the back of the house. William locked the door behind me. 3 deadbolts. I heard each one slide into place. "The collection is upstairs," he said. "I will show you now. Questions can wait until after." I followed him up the staircase. Each step creaked. The chemical smell grew stronger as we climbed. At the top, a hallway extended in both directions. Doors on either side, all closed. William led me to the second door on the right and pulled a key from his pocket. "This is the main room," he said. "You will spend most of your time here." He unlocked the door and pushed it open. The room was enormous, running the entire length of the house. Daylight filtered through heavy curtains, casting everything in a gray haze. And along the walls, arranged in neat rows, were display cases. Dozens of them. Glass-fronted boxes, each containing a figure. They were the most realistic dolls I had ever seen. Silicone, I assumed. Full-sized, adult proportions. Each one was dressed carefully, positioned precisely. Near the window, a woman in a blue floral dress sat in a wheelchair. Across from her, a teenage boy reclined on a bench, head tilted back, mouth slightly open. In the corner, a little girl in a white nightgown lay curled on her side. "This is the family," William said. "They require daily care. Temperature monitoring, humidity control, cleaning. I will show you the procedure." I walked closer to the nearest case. The woman in the blue dress. Her face was extraordinary. Every detail perfect. Fine lines around her eyes. Age spots on her hands. Individual eyelashes. Her hair was real, graying at the temples, pinned back with a simple clip. Even her fingernails had that subtle translucence of real keratin. "How long have you been collecting these?" I asked. William did not answer right away. He moved to a desk in the corner and pulled out a binder. "The procedure is written here. You must follow it exactly. Every day, same time. Morning inspection at 9. Evening inspection at 6. Any changes must be documented immediately. He handed me the binder. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, checklists, temperature readings, dates going back years. Some entries were in William's shaky handwriting, others in different hands, presumably previous caretakers. What kind of changes am I looking for? I asked. Deterioration, discoloration, any sign of degradation. The preservation process is delicate. If something shifts, if the environment is not maintained precisely, they can be damaged. He paused, his expression distant. They are very important to me. Over the next 3 days I learned the routine. Every morning, I would enter the preservation room and check each figure. I recorded the temperature, 20 degrees Celsius, and the humidity, 45%. I cleaned the glass cases with a special solution that William provided, careful not to let any moisture seep inside. I documented everything in the binder. It was eerie work. The figures were too perfect. When you got close, you could see the finest details. Pores in the skin, tiny burst capillaries in the eyes, the delicate blue tracery of veins beneath translucent skin. They looked like people who had been frozen mid-breath. But there was something else. Something I could not name at first. A quality to them that went beyond mere realism. In the right light, from the right angle, they almost seemed to breathe. I tried to talk to William about them, where he had acquired them, who made them, but he would not discuss it. Whenever I asked, he would redirect the conversation, or simply walk away. He spent most of his time in his room on the first floor, emerging only for meals and the occasional check on my work. And then, around the end of the first week, I started noticing something strange. William was changing. When I first arrived, he had been frail, trembling, barely able to climb the stairs. But each day, he seemed a little steadier, a little stronger. By the second week, the tremor in his hands had diminished. By the third week, he was moving with a confidence that seemed impossible for someone his age. The deep lines in his face appeared less pronounced. His eyes were clearer, sharper. At the same time, I started feeling worse. It began with headaches, dull pressure behind my eyes that never quite went away. Then, nosebleeds. I would be cleaning a case and suddenly taste copper, feel warmth dripping onto my upper lip. I started sleeping poorly, waking at 3 or 4 in the morning drenched in sweat, heart hammering. When I did sleep, I had nightmares. Always the same. The figures in their cases turning their heads slowly to watch me, their eyes following my movements. I told myself it was stress. Adjustment to a new environment, the isolation of Millfield, the strangeness of the work. But, deep down, I knew something was wrong. The headaches were getting worse, the nosebleeds more frequent, and the figures, they were changing too. Small things at first, the position of a hand, the angle of a head. I would check the woman in the blue dress in the morning, and by evening her hands would be in a slightly different position. I would document it in the binder, telling myself I must have remembered wrong. But it kept happening, again and again. Different figures, different changes. One morning, I found the little girl in the white nightgown with her eyes open. I stood there staring, my heart racing. Her eyes had been closed the day before. I was certain of it. I had noted it specifically in my log. But now they were open, glass blue and fixed on nothing. I went downstairs and found William in the kitchen. He was making coffee, moving with an ease that should have been impossible. When I arrived, he could barely hold a cup. Now he was humming softly, his movements fluid and controlled. "The little girl," I said. "Her eyes are open." He turned to look at me. For just a moment, something flickered across his face. Not surprise. Not concern. Something else. Satisfaction, maybe. "Did you check the hinges on the case?" he asked. "What?" "The hinges. If there is any pressure differential, the cases can shift slightly. It can create the illusion of movement." He poured his coffee, took a sip. "Make sure all the seals are secure." I went back upstairs. Checked every seal, every hinge. Everything was fine. But I could not shake the feeling that the figures were watching me. That they were aware somehow. Trapped. Suffering. That is when I started researching. Late at night on my phone, searching for anything that might explain what I was seeing. I found articles about something called the stone tape theory. The idea that traumatic events can be recorded in the environment somehow. That intense emotion, intense suffering, can leave an imprint. I found forum posts about haunted dolls. People who believed their dolls contained spirits, souls, fragments of consciousness. Some of them claimed the dolls would move, change position, that you could feel the presence inside them if you got close enough. I found articles about medical preservation techniques. Plastination, silicone injection, chemical encasement. Methods used to preserve anatomical specimens for teaching. But the articles I found described museum specimens, academic collections. Nothing like what I was seeing. Nothing that looked so perfectly, horrifyingly alive. And then, 6 weeks into my employment, I found the wedding photo. It was late afternoon. I was cleaning the room, moving around the cases with my supplies. I accidentally knocked over a stack of papers on William's desk. As I picked them up, a photograph slid free. Old, faded, the edges yellowed with age. It showed a young couple on their wedding day. The man was tall, handsome, his hair dark. The woman beside him was beautiful, smiling, her hand resting on his arm. Behind them, 3 figures. An older couple and a teenage boy. I looked closer. The woman in the photograph, the curve of her jaw, the shape of her eyes. I turned slowly and looked at the figure in the blue dress, the one in the wheelchair. It was her. The same face. Aged now, lined, but unmistakable. The woman in the photograph was the woman in the case. I felt ice run down my spine. I looked at the teenage boy in the photo, turned to the figure on the bench. It was him too. The same person, just older, or preserved. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the photo. I looked at each figure in turn, comparing them to the faces in the picture. The older couple, the little girl who must have been born after the photo was taken. They were all here. Every single one. William's family. Preserved. Encased. Displayed like specimens in a museum. I should have left right then. Should have walked out the door and never looked back. But I could not, because I understood now. These were not dolls. These were people. Living people, trapped in some impossible state between life and death. And William was using them somehow, draining something from them to make himself young again. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The figures were not moving because of pressure differentials or shifting cases. They were moving because they were trying to communicate, trying to tell me what was happening to them. And if I did not stop it, I was going to end up just like them. The next morning, I went into the preservation room with a hammer. I had decided during the long hours before dawn, I would destroy them. All of them. If I could break the cases, break whatever horrible process was keeping them in this state, maybe I could free them. Maybe I could end their suffering. And maybe, by doing so, I could stop William from continuing whatever dark work he was engaged in. I started with the central case, the one that held the woman in the wedding dress, perfect, pristine, her hands folded in her lap. I raised the hammer above my head. Stop. William stood in the doorway. He looked younger than he had when I arrived. His hair was darker, his skin tighter. He moved toward me with terrifying speed. "Please," he said. His voice was steady now, no trace of the tremor I had heard on the phone. "You do not understand." "I understand perfectly," I said. My voice shook, but I kept the hammer raised. "These are people. Your family. You have done something to them. Something terrible." "No." He stepped closer. "Clara. They are my family. That much is true. But you have it backwards." "What are you talking about?" He moved to the nearest case and placed his hand against the glass. "My wife, Margaret. She had a stroke 12 years ago. Massive. The doctor said she would never wake up. That even if she did, there would be nothing left of who she was. My mother suffered a similar fate. Early onset Alzheimer's. By the time she was 60, she did not remember my name. My father had a degenerative nerve disorder. My son was born with severe cerebral palsy. My daughter, she drowned in our pool. I brought her back, but she had been without oxygen too long." I stared at him, the hammer still raised. "I could not let them go," he said. "I could not let them suffer. And I could not let them die. So I found another way. Medical-grade silicone encasement. It is used for preservation of anatomical specimens. It stabilizes the tissue, prevents decay. They are in there, Clara. Still alive. Still breathing. Hearts still beating. Just very, very slowly. The silicone protects them. Keeps them safe." "That is not possible," I whispered. "That is not. My Parkinson's medication was recently changed," he continued, his voice almost gentle. "New formulation. It has given me my strength back. Reduced the tremors. I know it looks like I am getting younger, but that is just the disease receding. And you, Clara, the chemicals used in the preservation process. The formaldehyde, the glycerol, the methylene chloride. Prolonged exposure causes exactly what you are experiencing. Headaches, nosebleeds, paranoia, hallucinations. You have been breathing it in for weeks. It is poisoning you." "No." I took a step back. "They move. I have seen them move. They are suffering in there, trapped." "They are not moving," William said softly. "You are hallucinating. The chemicals affect the central nervous system. They cause delusions, paranoid ideation. Your brain is creating a narrative to explain what it is seeing. But the truth is much simpler, and much sadder. These are my family members, severely disabled. I could not bear to institutionalize them. I could not let them waste away in some facility where no one would care for them the way I do. So I found a way to keep them here. With me. Forever." The hammer felt impossibly heavy in my hands. My head was spinning. The chemical smell seemed overwhelming now, suffocating. I looked at the woman in the blue dress. Margaret. Not a doll. A person. A living person, encased in medical-grade silicone, her body preserved, her life suspended in some impossible twilight state. I tried to speak. Tried to ask him if they could hear, if they could think, if they knew what had been done to them. But the words would not come. The room tilted sideways. I felt my knees buckle. William caught me before I hit the floor. He was strong now. So much stronger than he had been. He lowered me gently, his face swimming in and out of focus. The poison has progressed too far, he said. His voice seemed to come from very far away. I'm sorry, Clara. I truly am. You were a good caretaker. But the exposure... It is too late now. I felt my heart stuttering in my chest. Irregular beats, painful, like something was squeezing it in a fist. My vision darkened at the edges. The last thing I saw before I lost consciousness was Margaret in her case, perfectly still, perfectly preserved. And in the dim light, I could have sworn I saw tears running down her silicone-encased face. I woke up in the hospital 3 days later. The doctors said a neighbor had found me collapsed on the front lawn of William's house. They said my heart had stopped, that the paramedics had brought me back. They ran tests, found elevated levels of multiple toxic compounds in my blood. Formaldehyde, methylene chloride, ethanol, chemicals used in medical preservation processes. They asked me what I had been exposed to. I told them everything. The house, the figures, what William had told me. They listened carefully, wrote it all down. Then they contacted the police. 2 days later, a detective came to see me. She sat beside my hospital bed and told me what they had found. The house was empty. William Gessner was gone. But the preservation room was exactly as I described it. 5 figures in glass cases. All of them were exactly as William had said. Living people, severely disabled, encased in medical-grade silicone. His wife, his mother, his father, his adult son, his young daughter, all of them still alive, hearts beating at 1 beat per minute, breathing once every 5 minutes. Brain activity minimal but present. The doctors who examined them said they had never seen anything like it. The preservation process had worked. It was keeping them alive. But they were not conscious, not suffering, not aware. They were in something between cryogenic suspension and a permanent vegetative state. Impossible to wake. Impossible to die. We arrested him last night, the detective said. Found him 2 towns over. He did not run. Just sat there, waiting. What will happen to them? I asked. His family. The ethics board is still debating. Some want to maintain the preservation indefinitely. Others think it is more humane to let them go. To end the process and allow nature to take its course. She paused. What do you think? You saw them. Spent time with them. I thought about Margaret in her blue dress. The teenage boy on the bench. The little girl in the white nightgown. Were they aware? Did some fragment of consciousness remain, trapped in those frozen bodies? Or were they truly gone? Nothing left but empty shells kept alive by chemistry and obsession? I do not know, I whispered. The detective nodded. She stood to leave, then paused at the door. One more thing, she said. The chemicals you were exposed to. The doctors say you are lucky to be alive. Another week and the damage would have been irreversible. Your cardiovascular system is permanently compromised. But you will survive. She left. I lay there in the hospital bed, listening to the beep of the heart monitor, feeling the irregular flutter in my chest. Outside the window, I could see the parking lot, the trees beyond, the normal world continuing as it always had. But I could not stop thinking about that room, those figures in their cases, and the question that haunted me, that haunts me still. If I had broken the case that day, if I had brought the hammer down and shattered the glass and the silicone and freed Margaret from her prison, would I have been killing her? Or saving her? I will never know. All I know is this. William Gessner called what he did love. He called it preservation. Protection. But I think there is another word for keeping someone alive when they cannot live. when they cannot die, when they exist in an eternal frozen moment with no hope of escape. I think that word is cruelty. And I think, in the end, that is what the chemical poisoning did to me. It did not just damage my heart. It showed me the truth I had been trying to ignore from the moment I walked into that house. Sometimes, love looks exactly like horror. And sometimes, the only thing worse than dying is being kept alive. They tell me William is facing multiple charges. Unlawful confinement, reckless endangerment, maybe even attempted murder for what happened to me. But I know he will never see it that way. To him, he was a devoted caregiver, a man who loved his family so much he could not let them go. I understand that now. The terrible logic of it. Because sometimes late at night when I cannot sleep, when my damaged heart stutters and skips in my chest, I find myself thinking about that preservation room, about the peace on those frozen faces, about the silence, the stillness, about how easy it would be to never have to feel anything again. And that is when I know the chemicals are still in my blood, still in my brain, still poisoning me in ways that have nothing to do with my heart. Sometimes I dream I am back in that room, standing in front of the cases, and when I look inside, I see myself, encased, preserved, frozen in a moment between life and death. And William is there, caring for me, maintaining me, never letting me go. And I cannot tell if it is a nightmare or a mercy. The doctors say I will recover, that my heart will stabilize, that the psychological effects will fade with time and therapy. But I know better, because I have seen what love can become when it refuses to let go, when it holds on past the point of reason, past the point of mercy, past the point where holding on becomes its own kind of violence. And now, every time my heart skips a beat, every time I feel that irregular flutter in my chest, I think of Margaret in her blue dress, of the teenager on the bench, of the little girl in her white nightgown, and I wonder if they ever asked to be saved, or if, like me, they just wanted the mercy of an ending.